Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Humanity Matters Weekly. Your host, Philip Fletcher, where we discuss faith and philosophy, nonprofit leadership, and social issues. We want to engage with ideas on what it means to flourish as a human being. Thank you for joining me tonight, whether it's live on Facebook and YouTube, or you're going to catch this at a later time, as well as over at the Humanity Matters podcast. So if you have not subscribed to the Humanity Matters podcast, you can find it at anchor.fm or wherever you get your podcast content. And hey, please leave a review. It would be very helpful to me. As always, you can connect with me on my website, philipfletcher.org. That is philipfletcher.org. Go over to YouTube, right? A lot of videos, a lot of great content, short videos, lectures, teaching type things. If you want to get to know more about me, how I arrive at a lot of what I talk about, a lot of the foundational things, just go over to YouTube. Just put in Philip D. Fletcher, put in Humanity Matters, and subscribe. I would like that very much. Hey, if you want to be a sponsor, hey, want to run an ad, 30 seconds worth, you want to do something for a whole month, whatever it may be, hey, hit me up. Send a sponsorship at any amount to PayPal, pfletcher73@gmail.com, pfletcher73@gmail.com. And then finally, if you want to be part of the mailbag, get part of the mailbag, get a cool, hey, email the Humanity Matters podcast at gmail.com, Humanity Matters podcast at gmail.com. And so getting through the first week of March, a lot of great things, interesting things going on, a lot of great things coming up as far as interviews. Next Sunday, 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, Spike Cohen will be joining me live for a Q&A and discussion about the ABCs of libertarianism, his lessons learned about running as the libertarian vice presidential candidate for the United States of America. And so why don't you join us? 5 p.m. We'll be taking your questions, things you want to know about politics, running for office. Maybe there's something you don't know about the Libertarian Party. Be part of that. Hey, we'll have Democrats coming. We'll be having Republicans coming, trying to get some socialists, types as well, trying to bring together all these different ideas so that you can be better informed. Then on Sunday, March 21st, let me bring that up here, Dr. Peg Falls-Corbett will be joining us as we have a discussion on punishment and the criminal justice system. We're going to talk about criminal justice reforms. We're going to talk about the death penalty, views about that. And so join us on Sunday, March 21st at 5 p.m. as well for our Humanity Matters one-on-one discussions. So quote of the week comes from Jon Stewart Mill and his book on liberty. If you haven't read it, I would greatly encourage you to read it. His thought was very influential in the development of what we would call liberalism, not liberalism as we would know it today, progressive, or what is commonly associated with those who affirm a democratic platform in terms of political party, but liberalism, freedom of speech, right? Freedom of religion, the opportunity to have freedom of ideas. And Jon Stewart Mill said this, and I quote, coming from his book On Liberty: "The only way in which a human being can make some approach to knowing the whole of a subject is by hearing what can be said about it by persons of every variety of opinion, and studying all modes in which it can be looked by every character of mind." Let me say that again. Jon Stewart Mill, from his book On Liberty: "The only way in which a human being can make some approach to knowing the whole of a subject is by hearing what can be said about it by persons of every variety of opinions, and studying all modes in which it can be looked by every character of mind." And that comes from Jon Stewart Mill from his book On Liberty. And we're going to talk more about that later. And so, again, if you would like to participate in the mailbag, or hey, you got a comment, you can put it up today. If you're following on Facebook or YouTube, I'd love to interact with you as well. But if you've got a question and you want to participate in the mailbag, I'll read your question, send you a gift. You can email me, humanitymatterspodcast@gmail.com, humanitymatterspodcast@gmail.com. And so the mailbag today, we've got two great questions. And the first comes from Anthony. And he asks, "I know you're really big into comic books. What do you think about the possibility of a Black Superman coming to the big screen?" Yes, Black Superman possibility coming to the big screen. So if you look behind me, right, I like superhero stuff, right? I got Marvel comic books, all right? I've got Star Wars collectibles. If you were to see the rest of my office, a lot of great things. I collect comic books, been collecting comic books since, oh man, the 7th grade, maybe. Been a long time. And I treat them now as a investment. And, you know, I go through this whole process. Typically my days off are on Friday. And so I go to the comic book store here in Conway, Arkansas, and I'll take about an hour and a half, 2 hours, sit and just put in some work looking at comic books, looking at their potential value, buying some that I may feel, you know, that could increase in value. You know, there's a lot of different variables. You know, now superheroes and movies and TV shows are kind of contributing to the increased value of comic books. But it was announced recently that J.J. Abrams was going to be picking up Superman, is going to be producing a movie, and that Ta-Nehisi Coates would be writing. And so that has created this thought that there's going to be a Black Superman. Now, if you're not familiar, obviously Superman, developed by Simon and Schuster, Action Comics #1. If you've ever seen that, you've got Superman holding up the green cards on the yellow cover. Whole lot of money it's worth, right? But that was the introduction of Superman in Action Comics. Batman came out of Detective Comics from the DC universe, right? So we're not talking about Marvel. We're talking about DC. Marvel is Captain America. See that? You know, Iron Man. If you've seen any of the Marvel movies, that's Marvel. Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, they come out of the DC universe. So J.J. Abrams is going to be producing the next one. It was being done by Zack Snyder. He did Man of Steel and Batman v Superman and the whole Justice League Snyder cut that's about to come out on HBO Max. But J.J. Abrams is picking it up. Now, if you're not familiar with J.J. Abrams, he did Star Trek recently. He's very famous for the lens flare type thing. He also did The Force Awakens with Star Wars, as well as Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, you know, whatever you think about those. And so now he's going to be picking up Superman and Ta-Nehisi Coates. Ta-Nehisi, he is familiar with some books. He's given some testimony on reparations and things. He's got a particular view of life. I feel as if he falls in what would be that critical race theory world in regards to critiquing American society from a perspective, seeking to understand power dynamics as relationship to race. And so he's picking that up. Now, Ta-Nehisi Coates, he recently did a stint writing a Black Panther series. And then he also wrote a series for Captain America. Both of those series, they're all right. You know, Ta-Nehisi Coates is not, he's all right storyteller regarding superheroes. But nonetheless, it got me thinking like a Black Superman, right? Now, in the DC world or even in the Marvel world, there is these things called the multiverse, right? In DC, if you followed the CW with the Arrowverse, right? The Flash, Supergirl that comes on, Superman and Lois, which was recently reduced. I know this is kind of nerdy right now, but I'm answering Anthony's question. There is this concept that there are multiple Earths, right? And there's different iterations of these comic books, right? So in Marvel, you've got Earth 616. That's like the main characters, the traditional characters. In DC, you've got what is Earth Prime, okay? Now, in a different Earth, there is a Black Superman, Val-Zod, okay? And he is president of the United States in this explanation of Superman, but he's also Superman as well. This is a Black Superman. So there's thoughts that Michael B. Jordan, he had approached WB about the possibility of producing a Black Superman. Now, we don't know whether this Black Superman was going to be Clark Kent, who's going to be Black, or it could be the Val-Zod character, or could it be somebody else, right? Needless to say, it's got me thinking, like, why do we need a Black Superman? Black Panther with T'Challa and what Chadwick Boseman and his interpretation of Black Panther, it demonstrated that we could have a original superhero, right, who happened to be of this particular ethnicity, right, and with a good story, right, could really bring in a host of different people, right? Now, there are other in comic book world, whether DC or Marvel or any other type of comic book companies that are out there, there are original Black superheroes, not heroes that are reimagined, right? But original heroes. So if you're familiar with the Falcon, Sam Wilson, he is an original Black superhero. Again, Black Panther. Here's some other ones for your consideration. There's Static Shock. My son grew up watching Static Shock. There is Black Lightning. He's currently on the CW. This is the last season of it. But Black Lightning, he's another original Black superhero. Now you've got as well Jon Stewart. Now, Green Lantern Corps, right? You can imagine a universal police body, right? So you've got different Green Lanterns, right? So you've got the Hal Jordan Green Lantern. He's one of the founding members of the Justice League. But then you also got a Guy Gardner. He's white. But then came along Jon Stewart. Now, if you're familiar with Jon Stewart, if you watched the Justice League or Justice League animated series back in the day, that's the Green Lantern you may be familiar with. If you're watching the DC animated universe, you're more familiar with the Hal Jordan Green Lantern. But needless to say, there could be a great story, Static Shock or Black Lightning, Jon Stewart, or Storm. People are familiar with Storm. X-Men series, Halle Berry played her. So I'm saying that to say, why not produce one of these superheroes on the big screen? Hey, Blade, Wesley Snipes. He made a popular series back in the day. The Vampire Hunter, the Daywalker is what they called him. So we have a body of work, a body of literature. There's a whole ton of source material out there where we don't need to tokenize, if you will, just take an existing character and make him Black, right? Superman or Wonder Woman or, Steve Rogers or Tony Stark or any of the other ones. We've got a body of a wealth of comic book material. Again, you can make an amazing, with the right story, Static Shock movie. With the right story, an actor, and all that kind of stuff, you can make an amazing Black Lightning movie, or a Jon Stewart Green Lantern movie, or a Storm movie. And so those are my thoughts about this Black Superman, right? I would rather see you leave Clark Kent alone. Clark Kent, Kryptonian, skin color is white, landed in Kansas. It is what it is. Make a great movie about Black Lightning or Jon Stewart. Again, Black Panther demonstrated overwhelmingly that the world with a great story would flock to go see that type of movie. Marvel made Blade, 3 movies. The first one was amazing. Second and third one was like, oh, okay, right? But again, that material is out there. There's no need to, I don't know, make it seem as if we cannot have a Black superhero who has his or her own original story. That the only way that it can be legitimized is if we put a superhero in blackface, for lack of a better term. So those are my thoughts on that, Anthony. Thank you for the question to the mailbag. Now, second question. All right. Coming from Derek. All right. My son is having a real difficult time figuring out what his next steps are after high school. He does not want to attend college immediately, and my wife and I are divided on the issue. I want him to go to school, but she leans more his direction. What advice do you have for us? From Anthony. Wow. So great question. You know, I grew up in a period, and I'm 48 years old. And so, you know, if you're around my age, we grew up in a period where, you know, go to college. You go to college, you'll be successful. You get a great job and all that good stuff, right? Now we're at a period in our society where going to college does not have to be the route for a number of reasons. One, there are just some individuals who learn best by just simply working in the context of what would be called a apprenticeship or an internship, right? And so they're more experiential, hands-on learning. For them, him or her sitting in a classroom for X amount of hours, watching someone talk at them, you know, there may be some interaction. That's just not their thing. They've gone through it through elementary school, through middle school, junior high, high school, and now, you know, graduation is upon them. You know, for them to learn is out in the world. There are others in which structure, that type of organization, that type of teaching where, you know, a lot of times it's in a lecture format, they thrive in that situation. And so for them to move on to a college setting, right, it may be their thing. All right. The other thing we've got to think about is this, is that the expense of going to a 4-year university or college, right? Now, all the talk about student loans and debt forgiveness and the increasing cost of colleges and university, it should give an individual pause as to whether or not they want to pursue that route and the financial debt that they may incur. And so, you know, one of the things that needs to be asked, and Derek, you know, I'm talking to any parent who has, you know, kids in the junior high, high school level, you know, those are things to think about. Is what your child, is it what he or she wants to do? Does it necessitate them paying money to learn, or could they go out and actually work and learn and actually receive money, right? So there's trade-offs in that. So obviously, if you know, if you have a child that wants to be a doctor or a lawyer, got it. There's gonna be some education that's got to be involved and all that kind of stuff. If you have someone that just wants to be a writer, right? who wants to be, produce videos or photography, some type of creative thing, they may not need to go to a 4-year university, maybe a 2-year, and just, go about their business. Or maybe they want to learn a different way. I have a friend here in Conway, Jessica Crum, and they started a learning institute. The name skips my mind right now, for creatives, right? And so that's another option for students who don't want to go the traditional route of learning. That's something to consider. The other thing I would say this to parents who see this differently, right? Ultimately, you want to support your child in what they're doing, right? Because they are the one, he or she is the one that's going to have to bear the weight, and the weight in terms of the work, the responsibility, and even some of the financial costs associated with a traditional way of learning. Traditional meaning the 4-year college or university. At the same time, they're going to have to bear the weight of if they go a non-college route. So they want to become a plumber or a welder, or instead they want to go into the military. Ultimately, they have to bear that weight. And in the long term, when a child is able to do and pursue those things that bring him or her meaning, all right, where they are discovering their purpose, right? With the acknowledgement that in either route, there's going to be some associated difficulty. What you can do as parents is, you got to step back a little bit, but give them the emotional support, right? The encouragement, ask them the questions that will continue to stir independence, consideration of different courses of actions, so that as they are growing into adulthood, they are able to make those decisions and they're able to live with those decisions. Okay. That is kind of the role as a parent. I dealt with that. Me and my wife, ourselves, our second child, she thrives in the work environment, right? She did some classes, but she thrives because she wants to work. Our oldest and our youngest, both of them, our oldest finished college, our youngest, she's at college. They thrive in that situation. And so we want to honor and respect their uniqueness as individuals. We want to respect their decisions and be able to support them in as many ways as possible, but at the same time, allow them the space to enjoy their successes, feel where they are struggling, okay, and see them move forward. Because the reality is, parents, you're not going to be there always. That's the reality, right? And so how can you support your child as they are growing into adulthood so that they are finding meaning in their work, they're discovering their purpose in their work, and along the way, they are being happy. They're being happy, right? And so that is a beautiful thing as a parent. It's difficult, right? Again, I grew up, college is for everybody, but it's not. College was for me, right? I love the college atmosphere, from my bachelor's to my master's to my PhD. I love that type of atmosphere, right? Other people that I know, that's just not for them. And that should be honored. And in honoring that, we honor and affirm their human agency. We affirm their personhood. And above all, we affirm the dignity that's already residing in them. So great question, Anthony, on that. Hey, parenthood, I'll tell you, it's difficult. It ain't sunshine and roses. It's times of you're on some highs, and there's times you're on some lows. There's times when you're just like, you're celebrating your kid, and there's other times you're just sitting like, oh my gosh, how are we going to make it through this, right? Kids don't come with an instruction manual. They don't. So whatever it is that you have in your life that grounds you, that guides you morally and ethically, right? Whatever those principles are that have been placed in you by your parents, you want to seek to pass those on into your children. And then in passing those values and those principles on, they're going to take those and apply them as it relates to their life. And that's the other thing we got to remember, parents, is our situation, right, is different than our children's situation. So the decisions that we made as persons at their age, whether they're 18, 19, 20, is wholly different than the decisions and the things they have to take into consideration today. And so it's important that we are sensitive to those things. And again, we want to ultimately stand and applaud as our children are pursuing meaning, as they are discovering their purpose and their calling in life, and just be like, I see you. I see you. That's being a good father. That's being a good mother. All right. So I hope that helps. Hey, we got a comment. All right. All right. What's going on, Rick? What's going on, Rick? Hope you are doing well. This is Philip Fletcher with the Humanity Matters Weekly. We have just been taking questions from the mailbag. If you want to participate in the mailbag, just send a question. All right. Humanity Matters Podcast at gmail.com. Humanity Matters Podcast at gmail.com. And now let's talk about minimum wage, right? So there is a lot of discussion going on about the minimum wage. A lot of discussion going on in Congress about raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Like, whoa, right? So that got me to thinking, right? Typically when we hear discussions about the minimum wage, we hear about how it's going to impact businesses and how it's going to impact the everyday person that is working. Okay, how it's going to impact businesses and how it's going to impact those who are working on a daily basis. All right. And so what also got me to thinking is, where are those voices? All right. Those people who this is really going to directly impact. All right. It got me to thinking a minimum wage increase for someone like an Amazon or a Walmart is based out here in Arkansas. They have the opportunity. Now I know people there are making at least $15 an hour or more, right? They can absorb that cost. But when the majority of the businesses in the United States are small businesses, okay, you have to ask yourself, those small businesses, right? Not those mid-sized businesses. I'm not talking about the Amazons and the Walmarts and the Teslas of the world, so on and so forth, right? And I'm talking about those businesses that have 3 employees, 4 employees, maybe 5 employees, right? They're not a franchise, all right? It's something that started as obviously an idea and that they wanted to provide a service to their community. And so it's just pretty local. How would something like moving from, like in Arkansas, it's $11. How would that impact them moving from $11 to $15, right? Would it be gradual? Would it be an immediate thing? But what's also lacking in the discussion is how that impacts nonprofits. Now, for full disclosure, I run a nonprofit, City of Hope Outreach, right? I have employees. I have some people. I have people I pay as employees, and I have some people that we pay some contract labor and stuff, right? But it got me thinking, not thinking about like the Goodwills and the Salvation Armies, right? These large nonprofits who are national or in some cases international, right? Who could absorb the cost, like an Amazon or a Walmart or a Tesla, who could absorb the cost of raising the minimum wage. How would that impact nonprofits. So, I obviously did some research, right? And so in the United States, this is based off of a report by the charitable sector who reviewed 990 reports. 990s are reports that nonprofits have to submit every year to maintain our status. Okay. There are approximately 1.5 million nonprofits in the United States. All right. So Congress created almost 36 types of tax-exempt organizations. All right. You can find them in the tax code. So, you got 501c3s, 501c4s, 501c5s, 501c3s, 6s, so on and so forth. Right. So some research was done by Salmon and Newhouse, who reported the following regarding nonprofits contributing to the economic and employer influence. Did you know that nonprofits, all right, employ over 12.3 million persons in the United States? That's significant. All right. Nonprofits are the third largest private employer behind retail trade. All right. So Targets, Old Navy's, right? And accommodation and food service. So your Chili's, your hotels, your Fridays, like nonprofits is number 3. That's significant. 12% of all nonprofits jobs in the United States are in social assistance. So my nonprofit, City of Hope Outreach, we would fall under that. We provide social assistance in terms of education, housing, community development, so on and so forth. All right. But 12% of all nonprofits do that. This includes employment in individual and family services, community food services, housing services, vocational rehabs, even child daycare. Okay. So immediately I can think of some immediate nonprofits that I work with on a day and weekly basis who fall in this category here in Conway. So Salmon and Newhouse, this is a study they did in 2019. They concluded, and I quote, the nonprofit sector is not only a significant employer, but also a significant contributor to employment growth, close quote. So critical to our discussion about, the minimum wage is the income generated in relationship to nonprofit employment. So Newhouse and Salmon, they continue to say that the total annual wages by nonprofits was $638 billion. Wow. This was second to manufacturing and professional services, right? Second, all right, to manufacturing and then professional services. That's, again, significant. All right, so in my state of Arkansas, all right, Arkansas nonprofits create 9.2% of the national share of private employment. Okay. Again, third largest employer in the United States are nonprofits. Here in Arkansas, we make up 9.2% of that employment. All right. So minimum wage. So as an employer, and that's what I am, right? Here's the commonality, whether you're for profit or profit. When I'm paying an employee, right, the things that I have to cover are workman's comp insurance. I have to cover unemployment insurance and pay payroll taxes, right? Now, as I increase hourly wages, right, those liabilities go up as well, all right? So then the question becomes, for me as a nonprofit, all right, because I don't sell anything. So what distinguishes me from ABC Business, who sells widgets, is that ABC Business is selling widgets, right? Obviously, they're going to make a profit, and then they're going to take that money. They got to cover their expenses, all right? So expenses include labor. Expenses include manufacturing the widget, right? Expenses include keeping the lights on and any type of maintenance, all right? And everything after that, there's your profit, right? Now, if I'm increasing my labor costs, everything associated with that one individual in terms of a minimum wage, right? Then I am pulling as ABC widget maker from the profits to cover that, right? They can do that. Now, as a nonprofit, now I'm setting aside like a Goodwill who sells things, right? As a nonprofit, again, nonprofits in general do not sell things, right? So we have a client coming in looking for housing assistance. That individual who is coming in looking for housing assistance, he or she is not saying, hey, I got to pay $10 to come see Coho to get housing assistance. That's not how it is. Our revenue is dependent on generosity. What kind of generosity? Well, you got to fundraise, right? So you got to put on events, Facebook fundraisers, you got to send out emails, cool little social media things. Hey, make a donation, one time, monthly, quarterly, or set up some type of annuity, something like that, an endowment, right? But all of that is based off of somebody's generosity. Another form of, so that's fundraising, all right? Another aspect of fundraising is that you got to write grants. Now, you can write grants to businesses, right? So businesses like a Home Depot, they've got foundations set up, all right? Or a Lowe's, okay? Or there's a family foundation that's out there. We have in Arkansas, the Arkansas Community Foundation, or you can write a grant to United Way. And so if you get approved, that's some revenue, but that revenue is restricted based off of what right for, and then reports in to say, hey, this is how we spent it. All right. Or you could write and get a grant from the government. But typically how government grants work is that they are reimbursable, right? So you have to spend the money first and then you get the money back. I'm saying all that to say this is that for nonprofits, and I'm thinking about those small nonprofits, right? Similar to those small businesses who are the majority across the United States. For those small nonprofits, then they have to go through a decision-making process, right? And so the options that are available to them is, right, they got to increase their fundraising. But to do more fundraising, there's an associated cost to that, all right? A second option is they may have to reduce services, right? Or another possible option they have to consider is revamping how they're going to conduct their labor in relationship to those services. See, those services cannot happen without labor, right? So that labor comes in this form in terms of nonprofits. I hope everybody's getting an education because I've talked to nonprofit leaders here in town, and sometimes their frustration is grants and people are willing to cover program costs, but they're not willing to cover the cost of people actually doing the work to make the program or the services happen, right? So labor can come in the forms of employees, all right? Second, it can come in the in the form of contract labor. So you go out, you get somebody, you contract with them to do a specific thing for a specific time, right? You can't tell them what to do or when to be there and all that kind of stuff. They're independent contractors. You can get interns. Here in Conway, we've got 3 great colleges, UCA, Central Baptist College, Hendrix College, right? Use interns, but the trade-off with interns is you only have them for a specific time, and it's tied to specific classwork, things they can and can't do. And so they may be there for a semester or for a year and part of that is you have to retrain people, especially when you have a turnover with interns. And then finally, you have volunteers, right? Good, well-meaning people who just want to come in and do something. But the volunteer, right? They show up when they want. If they don't show up, then you're kind of like, dang, how are we going to cover this service? The volunteers don't show up, then the service can't happen. So those are some of the options that nonprofits have to consider because they are not selling like a for-profit a good or a service. And Whereas a for-profit can look at the market and respond accordingly. They may need to raise prices or lower prices, increase production or reduce production. Nonprofits, people are having needs every day. Like, we're coming out of this pandemic. People have housing needs, food needs. Like, those things don't stop. They just keep going and going and going. And dollars have to cover that. And in order for those housing needs or food needs or rehabilitative needs or childcare needs to actually occur, it requires actual people to conduct those services. And then the other thing that you have to consider is that some nonprofits can get away with a complete volunteer workforce. All right. But then there are other nonprofits that are going to require actual people, employees, who are going to have to make that stuff happen, right? To oversee the infrastructure, execute the policies and procedures, do those necessary things so that those services can be provided. And so in that case, I'm thinking about transitional shelters or emergency shelters or childcare services or rehabilitative services. So you're going to need actual people employed because there are other associated things with those services that, it's going to require a whole lot of protection because there's an increased liability. There's an increased liability when you're watching somebody's kids. There's an increased liability when you have a house and you're watching over people, right? And everything associated with that. And so some things that you consider in regards to just the minimum wage, I would encourage you to research the Davis-Bacon Act that was passed in 1931. And that's where we get the whole thing about the prevailing wage, okay? And there's back and forth on that, right? As to why the Davis-Bacon Act was put into motion, right? Some argue that it was put in motion in order to respond to the number of Blacks who were moving from the South to the North to do work. And they were able to offer a price which came in lower. And so, hey, we put in this Davis-Bacon Act, we create a floor, right? And so now if you've got someone coming in saying, hey, I'll do it for $2 an hour, but the prevailing wage says, no, you got to pay people at $5, right? You kind of push people out, right? And then there's another competing notion that the reason the Davis-Bacon Act was put into motion was to protect workers. So you got protection of workers versus, complaints about cheap labor, right? I do find it interesting that if it's about, pricing out Blacks, many advocates who are for the minimum wage today, I wonder if they have considered that, the minimum wage is a part of systemic institutional racism, right? If you follow that line of thought that is going on today. And so why would you want to continue to insist on the perpetuation of a policy and a government intervention into two individuals into an agreement in terms of providing a service? All right. Why would you want something like that to perpetuate? Right. Something to consider. All right. Other proponents. All right. And this is from an article by J.B. Maverick, November 2020. And quote, he says this, that the primary argument advanced in favor of raising the minimum wage is that higher earnings would improve the overall standard of living for minimum wage workers by providing them with a more appropriate income level to handle the cost of living increases, close quote. That's a good argument, right? Cost of living goes up. You want to raise people's income, right? So to keep up with that cost of living increase, all right? A second argument for minimum wage increases, all right? Again, referencing Maverick. Please stay with me on this. I know it's kind of wonky, but it's good to lay out as much information as possible. Again, who's running through the back of my mind? Jon Stewart Mill. Consider all the information, right, about a particular topic. All right. So it's important for us to hear the arguments for and against the minimum wage. But going on, Maverick again, and I quote, "In the need for federal and state government expenditures on financial aid for poor and low income individuals," close quote. So what he's talking about is this: by increasing the minimum wage, the hope is that it reduces the need for individuals to pursue financial aid, all right, in relationship to persons who are poor and low income, all right? That by increasing the minimum wage, all right, that you would have less people seeking state and federal support, right? So whether that's food stamps, some type of housing assistance, so on and so forth. Now, opponents of a minimum wage increase identify the strong possibility of inflation and price increases, right? So basically, you don't get as much for your dollar as you once did, right? Inflation, okay? So businesses will have an increase in operation costs to include labor costs. That's what I was talking about, all right? If you run a business, then payroll taxes and associated liabilities, they increase as well, all right? Also, opponents identify an increase in wages will necessitate business owners hiring persons whose skills and productivity will correspond to that particular wage. Thus, then can impact youth and low-skilled persons. Now, Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams talk about this a lot, right? So if I'm going to raise my wage to $15 an hour, two things got to happen, right? If somebody's already making that, you got to raise their wages, right? The existing employee. Now, if you got a spot open where you're going to hire somebody at $15 an hour, the question becomes, do you want to hire someone who has not developed the social capital, employment capital, the skills to conduct that job, right? So they're not producing because they lack those skills. They're not producing at that $15 an hour. So you're going to go find somebody, right, who's got those skills. So what that does is it does impact teenagers who are looking for their first job. It does impact those individuals who don't have those skills developed yet. And so they are priced out. So this is kind of also an objection in response to, if you will, the proponents who said that by increasing the minimum wage, you would decrease the number of people seeking to access state and federal aid. Well, if those persons don't have the skills to meet the what I'm willing to pay, right? It's an economic benefit to myself, to my business, but then also to the people that are already existing in there to hire somebody who I don't have to put as much training into, because training is hours and hours is money, right? And productivity. So I'm going to go look for somebody who meets that level, right? I think if I was thinking earlier today as I was preparing for this, if I had two different people come knock on my door, right? And, spring is coming, you're going to have people come in that's going to cut grass, right? And I see these two people, and I know when I looked across the street from where I live, person A, he cut grass one way and it wasn't that good, right? And person B cut grass and it was excellent. And I'm going to pay $25, right? I'm going to pay $25 to the person that did the excellent grass cutting. I got the evidence. I see his skills or her skills and what he or she produced in relationship to the job that they're asking to be compensated for, right? So until person A improves his or her skills in grass cutting, right, I'm going to pay the person B the $25. I'm not giving the $25 to the person who can't cut grass well. So that's the thing I was thinking about. All right. And then finally, in regards to cost of living, we have 50 states, right? So the cost of living in one state is radically different than the cost of living in another state. right? I've lived in a multitude of areas. Cost of living changes. So I went to the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics and the U.S. Department of Labor. And one of the things I looked at was the average wage for persons who live in that state. Now, this is the mean. All right. So you add it all up and you divide by the total numbers. Right. So, for example, Arkansas, all right, is $20.52. All right. $20.52 is the average wage for all occupations in the United States. All right. Excuse me, for all occupations within the state of Arkansas. Correct. That's a correction. All right. Again, this is from the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics as well as the U.S. Department of Labor. So the minimum wage for Arkansas is $11 an hour. Now, let's shoot up the Northeast along the coast, right? Let's go to Maryland, right? In Maryland, the average wage is for all occupations in that state, $28.95. Their minimum wage is $11.75 an hour. Okay. Now let's compare that. Let's look at Oklahoma. So let's shoot to the Midwest. All right. In Oklahoma, the average wage for all occupations, according to the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics and United States Department of Labor, $21.93 in Oklahoma. The minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. All right. And then finally, in California, the average wage for all occupations is $29.47. Their minimum wage is $13 an hour. So you see, based off of where you may live, right? Just looking at the minimum wage is going to be different. And even if it was a blanket across the board, $15 an hour, right? Regardless of where you live, there would be some places in which that would still not be enough money. All right. And the reason I bring that up is there are a multitude of variables, cultural, because of that state, geographic, right? The existing industries that are there that are tied to one another, and other industries where a state has to go out and get some support from. Those influence wages, right? Those influence the presence of particular occupations. All right. So those are the things that we also have to consider in regards to the minimum wage. All right. Rick gives us a comment. Minimum wage increases have always been accompanied with short, intermediate private employment losses. Any offsets in overall employment have been as a result of public hiring. For a nonprofit, you would absorb the impacts of the wage increase, but be doubly exposed to the impact to overall employment, which would impact donations and the cost of materials and goods. One last challenge is the needs of your clients become more expensive. Yes, good point. And then the minimum wage does not change the value of the work provided. It only changes the numerical quantification of that effort, not its value. Market forces will drive for a relative equilibrium of intrinsic value between employee effort. Rick, that was a mouthful, bro. I appreciate it. Yes, good thoughts. So, hey, this is Dr. Philip Fletcher with Humanity Matters Weekly, and we have been talking about the minimum wage and looking at, both sides, for-profits, non-profits, as this discussion is happening, in Washington, D.C., and I'm sure it'll be happening in state legislatures across the United States. There are pros and cons, right? And so I would hope that you would just go do your homework, look at all sides, right? And then from there, come up with a reasonable decision, which is a good segue to the liberty of ideas. So I want to again put up our quote of the week by Jon Stewart Mill. And I quote, "The only way in which a human being can make some approach to knowing the whole of a subject is by hearing what can be said about it by persons of every variety of opinion, and studying all modes in which it can be looked by every character of mind," close quote. Now, there's been a lot going on, right? Dr. Seuss, political statements, things in the media, people digging up things that they did in high school, right? People's views about particular things. And, it's got him, the cool word right now is canceled. There's a cancel culture, so on and so forth. And so that's what's going on. And so I've been doing my reading, right? Been digging into some Jon Stewart Mill. Also been looking at some thought on toleration and intoleration. And if you follow me, we've talked about Herbert Marcuse and seeing what he's had to say about that. Just looking at history and how people have interacted with ideas, and then specifically with ideas that they disagree with. And the question becomes, what do we do with ideas that we have disagreement with? What is the place of free speech in our society today? In context, January 6th and that whole thing at the Capitol, I think that kind of amped people's minds up about that stuff. You had Twitter, shut down President Donald Trump. I don't even think he has a social media presence anywhere, right? You had other social media outlets that are not allowed to function anymore. All right. So it's got me to ask myself, how certain are you about your beliefs? How certain are you? How certain are you? From Jon Stewart Mill, I think we are cheating ourselves the opportunity to give up an error for truth, right? That's one possibility. Or we're cheating ourselves of the opportunity to see the vitality of our idea and belief due to, and I quote, the collision with error, close quote. What do I mean on the former? Right? So you have idea A. Okay? Oh, prime example. I testified down at the legislature last month about the whole 1619 project, so on and so forth, right? So the existing information that's given out is from 1776 forward about American history. All right? You have the 1619 project come along with Nicole Hannah-Jones, so on and so forth. You got critical race theory, okay? So do we want to do away with the opportunity to engage with the ideas that are put forward by the 1619 project, right? Because that could offer us the opportunity, all right, to exchange some errors that can be existing in the 1776 history for fuller truth. All right. At the same time, here's the second part of this. Engaging with the 1619 project, its view of history, and the idea of the 1776 view of history, right? And engaging with the 1619 view of history, right? That can afford those who hold that view of history to see that there's errors in the things that they propose. Are we cheating ourselves by saying we don't want this taught? Are we cheating ourselves by saying, I don't want to see this on social media. I don't want to see this published in newspapers, if you still read a newspaper. I don't want to see this, played on YouTube or shown in a movie theater, so on and so forth. All right. If we are pushing aside competing ideas, we are cheating ourselves. We're removing ourselves from the beautiful opportunity of discovering more truth, right? But then also purging any error that is existing within our idea box, our brains, right? So there are ideas and beliefs, and I put this up on Facebook this week. There are ideas and beliefs which persist in various mediums. All right. Yet the removal of those mediums do not extinguish the persistence of either. Right. So again, last year was a whole talk about the removal of Confederate statues, right, and memorials, so on and so forth. Right. Now, you can take down the statues, you can take down the flags, the Confederate flags, right? But taking those down, all right, does not end the persistence of those ideas as they relate to Confederate statues, Confederate flags, so on and so forth. Those ideas still persist. How do they persist? They persist in individual human beings, right? Ideas, whatever idea that you hold, you carry them. So the only way to actually stop an idea, all right, it takes us down the road of, well, if we really want to end this idea, then we have to remove the people who perpetuate this idea. Now, takes us down a dangerous road. It takes us down a dangerous road. So, one, if we don't want to engage with competing ideas, it takes away an opportunity of growth, either to see the vitality of the truth that we hold or to exchange an error for truth. But the second thing is this, is that ideas persist, and ideas persist in people. You can shut me down from this whole platform, right? You can shut me down. None of this could ever broadcast again on Facebook or YouTube. But these ideas that I'm talking about, these things that I'm talking about today, they're still going to exist in me. So I can get up from this table, go downtown, and just talk about them, right? The ideas persist. The only way that you can stop, you can reduce the ideas that I'm putting forward is to silence me forever. So there's never a truer statement, and I'm borrowing from Ecclesiastes. There's nothing new under the sun, close quote, right? So ideas, they originate, they transform, they manifest in policies and national decisions and personal relationships. So we have to admit, if we seek to silence an idea, we must ask, why? We have to ask ourselves, why? Second, we have to ask ourselves, what is our motivation? So here's some questions for you. Do you want an idea silenced because you don't know how to respond? Second, maybe are you not certain? Let me start over. Are you not certain about the idea that you enunciate because it has not taken root in your life? In other words, are you just parroting what you heard a bobblehead say? I'm a bobblehead right now, right? Are you parroting what you've heard on a particular news source or what you read scroll across your Facebook feed or your Twitter feed or on your Snapchat? Are you just parroting that and you haven't done the hard work, right? Have you looked at the different opinions who have spoken on that list, that particular issue? Third question, is the opposing idea no longer culturally relevant or has an associated negative outcome when actualized in the lives of everyday persons? Is the opposing idea no longer culturally relevant or has an associated negative outcome when actualized in the lives of everyday persons, right? We should want to realize there are a multitude of ideas, all right, existing today, which in previous periods, think about this, there are a multitude of ideas today that existed in previous periods that were under threat of censure, alienation, aka excommunication using religious language, shame, aka people being called heretics, or death. So there were people who enunciated ideas that we just take as quote unquote gospel today, that we talk about them freely. But in a previous period, all right, people were censored. People, not the ideas, people were censored. People were alienated or in a religious setting, excommunicated. They were deemed with shame or in a religious language, made heretics, right? Or in some cases, death. The ultimate way to silence an idea. So what do I mean? Think about the Salem witch trials, right? And people who were discovered to practice witchcraft were put to death. But lo and behold, today, right? We got TV shows about sorcery and witchcraft. We got a superhero that a lot of people cried about on Disney Plus, Wanda, the Scarlet Witch, right? J.K. Rowling wrote a whole series of novels about sorcery and witchcraft, and it's just celebrated and accepted today. But there was a period of time where if there was a person who stated that they believed that sort of thing, death was the option, right? Here's another example, racial essentialism, right? So what did that take the form of? Well, race-based chattel slavery, okay, in the United States, okay, and particularly coming out of the South. It was applied in Germany with the Holocaust. But now, racial essentialism is seen as a valid approach codified in what is termed anti-racism, right? So Ibram Kendi, Robin DiAngelo, so on and so forth, right? White privilege, white fragility, how to be anti-racist, right? It's even been talked about here at a local university, right? Lastly, the idea of God as a supreme reality. So there was a time like religion, views of God just dominated the culture, right? Europe, Middle East, Africa, so on and so forth, right? Specifically here in the United States, that was like, yes, it wasn't the state, it wasn't the king, everything, the king, presidents, governments answer to God. Now, that's not acceptable. What is the acceptable line of thought? The idea is the state is a supreme reality. And religion, keep that to yourself. So how can these ideas be confronted? If uncomfortable and life-changing opposing ideas are not allowed a seat at the table. Well, what do you mean, Philip? This is what I mean, right? In issues regarding the state, every idea should be welcomed at the table. Every idea should be welcomed at the table. In terms of the current state of race in America, every idea needs to be welcomed to the table. And those ideas need to be engaged with. In terms of economics, like we just talked about the minimum wage, every idea needs to be welcomed to the table. And I'll say this, it is lazy thinking it is lazy thinking, and it also demonstrates a lack of willingness to engage with an idea if you use ad hominem attacks, right? So if you use ad hominem attacks and you call somebody lazy, racist, or misogynist, or they don't care about the poor, or you want the whole United States to fall, right? What you are demonstrating is not only do you not have confidence in the position that you are asserting, right? But you're also demonstrating a lack of willingness to hear from the other side, possibly out of fear that that idea at some level may be right. So engaging with these ideas for men and women in the United States of America to have the liberty to communicate their ideas. Now, what I'm not saying is you don't have the liberty to take an idea and force it on somebody or take somebody's life or property. That's not what I'm saying, right? If you want to sit at a table, I sat at the table, I've told people before, sat at the table with people who have white supremacist views, right? We can sit and have that discussion all day and all night, right? But it's going to be a discussion, right? And we're going to engage with the ideas. My view, his or her view, right? I have views about the state, all right? I think, quiet as kept, I think the state does too much, okay? But I have to engage with someone who thinks the state is actually not doing enough, right? And let's learn from one another. That is the beauty of the country in which we live in. And so I would encourage people, resist the urge to silence competing ideas. Take the time, study, read up on an idea, okay, that opposes the idea that you hold. So like the minimum wage. So if you're all against the minimum wage and raising it, I would encourage you to go do some work on proponents of the minimum wage. See why they're making that argument. Is there any validity to their argument? All right. Educate and inform yourself so that when you are sitting and talking with somebody, right, both of you can, as Isaiah says, sit down and reason together. All right. If God can call people to sit down and reason with him, I think that human beings can sit down and reason with one another. All right. Also, remember is there are ideas that we hold now that weren't acceptable back in the day. Okay. Those are things that we got to consider. Like, freedom of speech was an idea that was not acceptable back in the day, right? If you go back in history, right, you couldn't just say whatever you wanted to say. So let's work to avoid returning to that time of life where people were censored, where people were shamed, alienated. All right. Let us not end up in a situation where it may cost a person or a group their life. All right. So, hey, thank y'all for joining me today on the Humanity Matters Weekly. This will be available if you want to go back and watch the whole episode on YouTube, as well as it'll be available on the Humanity Matters podcast. Reminder, next Sunday at 5 p.m., I will be sitting down with Spike Cohen. He was a 2020 Libertarian vice presidential candidate for the United States of America. We'll be talking about libertarianism and lessons learned from running for office. And then the following Sunday at 5 p.m., we'll have a one-on-one with Dr. Peg Falls-Corbett. She is on faculty at Hendrix College, and we'll be discussing punishment, criminal justice, the death penalty. It's going to be very enlightening. As always, remember, connect with me on my website, philipfletcher.org. Subscribe over to the YouTube channel. I would appreciate it very much. You're on YouTube anyway. Just go find me. Subscribe. I would appreciate it very much. Humanity Matters Podcast. Hey, subscribe there as well. Whether you're on Anchor, you get your podcast content off of Apple, Android device, Spotify, whatever. I would appreciate it very much. Give me a review. You want to be a sponsor? pfletcher73@gmail.com. If I'm giving you any type of value, be a sponsor. I would love to run an ad, show the support. And if you want to participate in the mailbag, Humanity Matters Podcast at gmail.com. Humanity Matters Podcast at gmail.com. And as always, I got to give a shout out to my nonprofits, coho58.org, Hope Village, and replicate. Go to coho58.org, hopevillagecoho.org. We're about to do a big thing this spring with Hope Village. We're very excited about it. A lot of long, hard work. It's going to be coming to fruition. And so if you would like to support that effort, let's go to hopevillagecoho.org, make a donation. Make a donation to Coho so we continue to provoke hope in people. I appreciate y'all very much. And as always, remember to be loved, to be kind, to be generous. And if we remember to live in hope, we can do the impossible. Y'all take care. God bless. When I say your name, it says you exist and that you matter. I can't transform what I don't think exists. I won't transform the person I don't think that matters.